Hi, welcome to City Scene with Mayor Mike Cahill. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski. Your Honor, welcome.
Hey, Walt, good to see you.
Good to see you. And we've got a lot of things that I want to talk to you about today, and hopefully we can fit them into this half-hour segment. I'm calling this show "Let's Talk Projects," and there's a lot of things, a lot of projects going on in the city projects, National Grid utility projects, state projects with the bridges in Ryleside, senior housing at Briscoe, et cetera. So we're going to try to, and of course the library and the city hall renovation projects. So we're going to try to see if we can hit most of those. Let's begin with the library renovation project. And it's more than just replacing the HVAC system at the library. So walk us through the scope of the project and how this all evolved.
Sure. So the HVAC system we know we have to replace. We've known that for several years. We brought an architectural group in to do a feasibility of different ways of replacing it, different types of systems. And that gave us a starting point. And so then we'd asked the City Council a couple of years ago to approve some upfront money to get going on design, which we did. And part of that design work was to then take a real close look at the building envelope. So the library is the 1913 original library and then a 1993 addition.
Right.
And it turns out from doing the building envelope testing that the original library is in pretty good shape. The addition, sadly, 30-year-old addition, wasn't built as well. In fact, this is a little bit before I became mayor, but the city ended up having to sue the construction firm that built the addition back.
Really? I didn't know.
Yeah, it was finished in 1993. The city ended up in court with them over the next couple of years, and ended up getting some additional money from the construction firm at that in 1995, I believe.
But the defects were never fixed. Is that
there were improvements made, but at the same time, here we are almost 30 years later, and what we found was that the energy efficiencies, meaning the ability of the building to keep the outdoor air from getting in and the indoor air from getting out, lots of leaky places, right? Yeah. So in looking at this project, it became clear that we needed to put a new roof on a significant part of the newer building. Mm-hmm. And that's in part because there was all kinds of airflow leakage and some water getting in and out too, or getting in. And so that was in part because there was no effective insulation under the roof. So the plan now is to put in significant new insulation, put on a new roof, make it airtight. And also, one of the problems that was caused by all that is a lot of ice damming and icicles getting created in the winter, and we've had to close the main entryway at times
because of the icicles.
When there's a buildup, and so that's a public safety risk.
Sure.
So there's a significant amount of energy efficiency work that's needed to make the building work better. And then there are specifically a couple of rooms where there's planned to be some wall replacements because those rooms there's a condensation problem, and so it's hard to keep the humidity right in those rooms and to keep them heated and cooled properly. And that's really the heating and cooling challenges throughout the building.
Right. Now, speaking of heating and cooling, I know that the city has decided on a geothermal heating cooling, and I know I have heat pumps at my house, but they're above ground. These are geothermal, which means that they're below ground. Tell us how the city decided to go with the geothermal process.
Right. So as I think you also know, as I know you know, and I think a lot of people watching know, we're presently in front of the City Council with a request to approve the project budget.
Right.
And the public hearing started 2 meetings ago. It continued this past Monday night. A lot of information being shared, a lot of public discussion of the project. They've continued that public hearing to Monday, April 8th. And our goal and our hope is that at that time, that evening, they'll complete the public hearing and take a vote on the project funding request. We selected a geothermal ground source heat pump geothermal system as opposed to a gas replacement or an air source heat pump replacement, in part because it's significantly by a lot the best, highest performing system. It will allow us to create, I think it's close to between 30 and 40 zones in the building where there are now only a handful.
Wow.
So you'd be able to, one room at a time, one section at a time of different floors, adjust and manage the heating and cooling load at different times a year. So that will be both more energy efficient, and it will also help to ensure that the staff and visitors to the library are more comfortable at all times.
Well, I was going to ask you.
Oh, I'm sorry. The other piece is energy efficiency wise.
Yeah.
Today, we're cooling the building with rooftop air conditioning units, and that's with electricity. And then, of course, we light, and anything you plug in is electricity. We're heating the building today with gas. All of the energy that's used now, right? If we build the geothermal system, the gas will go away and all of the heating will become electric.
Yeah.
Together with the current cooling and lighting that's electric. And with all that said, with this new system, we'll use less electricity with the geothermal system than we use today. So right now we're only using electricity for the AC and the lighting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Add all the heating, we'll still use less electricity with the new system. Right. It's a vastly improved and superior
And I
system.
think that's reflected. I'm going to ask Chris in the control room to put up. This is a spreadsheet, and maybe you can kind of pick out some of the things that you want to emphasize.
Sure.
The total cost of the project, I know, with the updated cost is about 17. Let's call it $17.4 million. But then these are some of the offsets. Maybe you can talk about some of that, and of course the greenhouse gas reduction and the et cetera. So tell us.
Happy to. It's more expensive with upfront cost to build a geothermal than it is certainly a gas replacement. However, we were determined as we looked at that cost differential to find resources to put directly to the project so that the Beverly taxpayers wouldn't be paying that kind of money. Right. So as you look at this, yes, the initial cost estimates for the geothermal were $18 million. We've had just last week, and this is a function of any project, the further into the design and then eventually into construction, the more refined, the realities get. And so right now during the design document phase, we got an updated cost estimate last week, and it knocked about $700,000 off the projected cost. Now, we'll get a further refined cost estimate, and then the project starts being built. So the cost knocked $700,000 off the 18 and 17.3. But then you look at all these grants and incentives. We have grants, we have rebates, we have incentives, we have some straight earmarks from state and federal government, and you add them all together, and they're about $2.5 million.
$2.5 million, yeah.
Then you add in, and this is really a big part of why we can do this project. The Inflation Reduction Act was the federal law passed in the late summer of 2022.
Right.
It's essentially a clean energy incentive law the federal government passed to promote building more clean energy, building really the economy to support clean energy, battery manufacturing, battery storage, manufacturing all the component parts to solar and geo and wind and all that, and have it all done domestically. Yeah. So what we did was we were estimating what we thought we might qualify for. This isn't a grant, this is a tax credit.
Yeah.
Okay. So we build the project according to the certain specs. We earn the tax credit. We file with the IRS and we get the payment.
Okay. So
now it didn't exist for a city or a nonprofit until the IRA was passed because we're not a tax-paying entity, right? Yeah. But we file as if we were, and we earn the tax credit, and the money comes to us in the form of a check from U.S. Treasury.
Yeah.
So
that's a significant amount.
Well, it is, and it's not just kind of a shot in the dark either. We retained Deloitte, the tax consulting firm. We knew we would need to retain somebody to walk us through because we've never been a taxpayer. We've never filed, never been a tax filer. We're not a taxpayer. We're just, we've been made eligible to file. I was at the Winter Mayor's meeting in D.C. a few months ago, and a principal from Deloitte was on a panel talking about the IRA, and we've been waiting for the U.S. Treasury to put the final guidance out for IRA since last summer, because we've been banking on it, knowing that it's a significant part of how to finance a clean energy project like this. So I talked with this fellow from Deloitte afterwards, and it turns out they're the right outfit, the right firm to work with. So we've retained them, and they took a kind of a deep dive with our architect and our construction management team, looking at all the numbers in this project, and they have laid out to us a path that 4.3 is a number they're comfortable that we will earn as a tax credit.
Okay.
It's based upon how we build and so forth. So if you take that $2.5 million in grants, incentives, earmarks, rebates, and you add the IRA tax credit, and then these last two numbers, 700 plus and roughly 300, those are credits that we've earned on city electric accounts through our clean energy work, through the solar arrays that the city has hosted in recent years. So you add that other million in, and now you're looking at a project cost not of 18 million or 17 million, but of 9.5 million.
Yeah.
And so, and that's not the end of it. There's an owner's contingency that is built into the project cost. That means that if there's an additional change in scope during the project, we could use some of that owner's contingency to pay for it.
To pay for that, yeah.
Well, we have a track record now. We built the middle school, we built the police station. We turned back most of the owner's contingency from the police station project. We turned back a good amount of the owner's contingency from the middle school project, would have turned back more, but we collectively decided during the project, after evaluating the need for it, to put some additional money into the turf field at the middle school.
That's right, yeah.
We did a study that showed you get about 1,500 more hours a year of use, and that's even without lights, on a turf field than a grass field. But really the underlying point is, for the most part, that owner's contingency, we manage these projects very hands-on, very aggressively, and we don't spend that contingency. So our goal is to turn back about an additional 1.5 million. The owner's contingency at present is estimated at 1.8. So if we're able to turn back 1.5, now the project's down to about an $8 million project.
Yes.
Again, not an $18 million project. The cost to the Beverly taxpayer would be down to about $8 million.
So that's less than half of the
And it's an
original
HVAC
estimate.
replacement, and as I mentioned, all these building envelope and the new roof that's needed, and there's about $500,000 in ADA, Americans with Disability Act, mandates that are under federal law, so they've got to be part of the project. Yeah. But again, we think we can get the project cost down to about $8 million. There's one remaining piece, the direct pay tax credit that we intend to earn. We may be eligible for more money than that. U.S. Treasury hasn't given the final language on what they call domestic content. We're going to try to be using domestic content, meaning things that are manufactured or assembled or mined or whatever, domestically versus internationally. If we're able to meet that, we could get an additional 10% credit, which could lead to up to an additional $1 million. We're not adding it in here. We're not factoring it in, but we're going to try our hardest to meet that as well. So you look at a project that we hope will come in at about $8 million, and maybe we can do better than that.
Yeah. And is that made in America, if I may call it that, is that like a cash rebate, or how would that work?
It would mean, if we meet it, it would mean that our IRA tax credit is just larger.
Oh, just larger than that.
Than that 4.3.
So this is the conservative one, and it could be another $1 million on top of that. Okay, all right. Well, let's move on to the City Hall renovation project, which is another big one. So this. Talk a little bit about the project, because you've got to take the people out of City Hall and house them someplace else for like a year and a half, and kind of give us the overview of the City Hall project.
Sure. So the City Hall was last renovated during the Depression. If you look at the plaque at City Hall, I think it was 1934 or 1935.
Almost 100 years ago.
It's been a while. We don't have enough space for our staff to work properly. We have departments that are not on site that should be. specifically the health department, which is housed in the senior center,
Right.
and the inspectional services department that's
across
housed
the
in the
street.
GAR hall
Yeah.
on Dane Street.
Yeah.
So the goal is to provide our staff the needed workspace, better modern workspace, and bring the other departments back home. And the senior center needs the space that the health department is using now as well. We also don't have an HVAC system on either the first or the second floor, and the one on the third floor is substandard. And that really got hammered home during COVID.
Why?
Right? The inability to filter air. And so our commitment is there to make sure that we modernize the building, which was built in 1783, and ensure that it can serve the community for a long time to come. As a part of that, the old police station sits vacant right next door.
Right.
We'll be renovating that.
Right.
Now, earlier on, there was talk about tearing down the old police station, building a new building, annex, whatever. Those costs were going to run away. So a lot of the time we've spent on all these projects, the library, the city hall, and in a minute talking about the youth center, is that all of the cost escalations that have been happening since COVID have hit us as we're looking at all three of these projects. So bringing those costs back down in various ways to where they fit the budgets that we've been looking at from the start has been, our real charge. And with City Hall, we are looking at a project that will cost about $25 million in total when done. As I said, the library project we're hoping will be in the $8 million or less range. That's all consistent with the way we've been building our debt, our debt servicing over time. Because just like, when we look at our own assets at a personal level, right? If we have a house, if we have a car, we have whatever else, we have either installment payments on a car, mortgage payments on the house. You've got to plan those expenses.
Right.
And in the city's operating budget, we have a line item for debt service. It's in the operating budget, but it services the debt that builds the big projects.
Right.
And it's said generally that 8 to 9% is where you want to be, or you don't want to really be above that for debt service in an operating budget. We're at 5 3/4%.
So you're well below that.
Under 6% of our city's operating budget is a line that pays our annual debt service costs, principal and interest costs on our projects. So, and when we bring on long-term debt, when we bond for the City Hall project and the library project, and we may not need to bond for the library project. We're working to try to knock those numbers down, and that would be even better. But when we bond, it will all fit within our plans to keep our debt service at around 6%.
Yeah.
Because we have debt we're paying now for older projects that'll be finished and it'll come off the books.
So as one set of expenditures goes down, the other one comes up.
You fill in a new
and so
project.
you kind of stay right at that 6% level. Yeah.
And that's the goal, because we've got all of the city buildings, all the school buildings, right? We've got a lot of other infrastructure, both above and below ground. We have some, more expensive vehicle purchases, like our whole fire fleet, a lot of our DPS fleet. We try to buy those with cash because they're large pieces of equipment, but they're smaller than you want to bond for 20 or 25 or 30 years, right? Yeah. So the bonding is meant for the buildings. Right. And if you think of work that's been done in the past, new high school, new middle school, before that all the new elementary schools. There was significant money spent at City Hall, and I shouldn't overstate that. There was exterior work on the pointing of the bricks and a new roof that went in on City Hall, meaning that work doesn't have to be done as part of the rest of the renovation. But that's the goal with debt service, is to address those projects and keep it as a manageable percentage of your overall budget.
Yeah. Now, one of the interesting things, maybe you can touch on it, Mike, is that the City Hall personnel will be moving literally across the street to the old dollar store building for, I don't know, about a year and a half is what the project supposedly will take. So tell us about that. How is that going to work?
So that's still the goal. Yeah. Right. We bought the dollar store largely to protect 107 parking spaces
spots, right.
that we had all, for decades, kind of assumed, understood was ours.
Right.
But those who worked for the city knew that we were leasing those spaces from the family that owned the dollar store parcel all that time. So we ended up having, it's a long story there, but we ended up having to buy the parcel to protect the spaces, because any other way of protecting spaces would have cost more, and we wouldn't have had as many spaces. So now that it's ours, the goal is to move the library staff in there and some of their operations in there when the library project's underway. And we're looking at the rent-a-center space for that.
Yeah.
And then after that, we're hoping to move City Hall staff into both the dollar store space and the rent-a-center when the library folks are back out. It took us some time to get the state to confirm for us that it would be viewed as a temporary use that wouldn't trigger the new building code, which would have cost a lot more money, the new state building code. But we got that agreement with the state. So now we've got somebody in, working on it for us to make sure that we can pinpoint the costs that will be involved with moving across the street. If the costs are too great financially for the work we need to do, then we won't move across the street. We'd have to look at finding and renting commercial space, perhaps up around, Cherry Hill area. We don't want to do that. We want to stay right in downtown for, I think, a lot of the right reasons. And again, it's our goal and our intent that we'll be able to move in across the street, provide our staff what they need and the public the access to city services without the price tag being so high that we can't afford to do it. So that's built into the cost of the library project. I'm sorry, the City Hall project.
City Hall project. Now is the idea then, after the City Hall project, the library project is gone and those people can move back, will the city retain ownership of those buildings or sell them, or what?
No, so two things we plan to do. One is that when we can, and it hopefully will be sooner than when we're done using the building, we'll RFP development rights over the back parking lot for a small, kind of right-sized, affordable housing development. Homes for working families who need some help with the cost of rent and living. Probably about 50 units, which is what we've learned from talking with various affordable housing developers around what types of projects can get funded through state and federal affordable housing funds. In that case, somebody would need to build second-level parking for those apartments, and then third and fourth level apartments, which makes sense. And then the remaining existing building, this is behind that building. The existing building, when we no longer need it, we'll sell that for somebody to redevelop is the term, but we're going to have a public process first to talk about and try to reach some consensus in the community about what do we let people do with that building. It's going to have to be retail on the first floor, but do they keep the same building just as it is? Do they knock it down and build a new one? That's really a community conversation we've got to start.
Now, I know I'm getting a time signal. We don't have that much time left, but and we could probably do a part 2 in this, I guess.
Yeah.
But let's talk a little bit about what's called the Beverly Regional Transmission Reliability Project, and this is a national grid project where you're going to replace an existing underground transmission line with a new one. Tell us about that and how is that going to happen? Okay.
So last point on the dollar store, we may or may not move City Hall over there when we need to. We're still trying to make sure that we do that the right way. If the dollars work, we'll do it that way.
Yeah. Now let me just say, the viewers are looking at this map that will show where and some sections of this transmission line are already done. Others are projected to be completed this year. So tell us, kind of give us the entire scope of this. Why is this being done? Yeah.
Sure. So for the people who know about this project, they know it well.
Yeah.
All right, so, and I'm not going to try to go into all the history, except to say that National Grid, it's their project, it's not ours. National Grid has 2 electric transmission lines that come through Beverly and that tie into the East Beverly substation. Cole Street, Foster Street, Boyle Street come together at a train crossing, right up towards Girl Scout Pond, the Girl Scout camp. Right there in the woods, just off of Boyle Street, is the big East Beverly electric substation. these lines go into there, and from there they provide electricity for Centerville, Beverly Farms, and all the way up to Rockport and into Essex, and I think maybe a little more inland. But it's about 180,000 ratepayers, homes, businesses, et cetera, north of that station. The line that's coming through the city and that's causing all this digging in the streets, which has frustrated everybody, is because National Grid's 55-year-old line that was laid up the railroad tracks needs to be replaced. We fought with them for a year to try to get them to replace it in the rail bed.
And that didn't happen.
It didn't happen because the MBTA and the Federal Railway Administration both said, no, you're not going to do it here. There's a lot of what you might call furniture already underground and above the rail bed, including the other electric transmission line to this one, which is overhead on the right-hand side of the train tracks on the northbound direction.
Okay.
So that's newer. That's currently the main line for the East Beverly substation and everybody who lives north of there. This, when the replacement line, which is going through our neighborhoods, under our streets, and connects over to East Beverly, when that's done, that will become the main line, and the overhead will become the backup or support line.
Okay.
So these are different colors because they show work that's been completed, work that's supposed to be done this year, by spring or summer, work that's later this year. Bottom line is, I just wanted to put this up to reassure everybody that when the project is done, all of those streets are going to be repaved curb to curb with money that National Grid has agreed to pay the city. And the money's already started coming into our accounts. Sidewalk work on some parts of the route based on them, cutting into sidewalks, but road work for the whole route. And we're also trying to do a couple of nearby adjacent streets as well with the money. So it's the whole route, which goes through Goat Hill, up Wellman, Weber, River, and then it goes up across Broadway, right across Cabot by City Hall, Thorndike, Endicott, Hale, Lothrop, Cross, Boyles. All those streets are going to be repaved curb to curb. And then Ray and Bowden, which are streets on either side of the Cove Playground, are going to get redone. Weber on Goat Hill will get done the whole length of it, not just the part that they're digging up for the job. And we're trying to do Park Street from by the train station on down to Federal Street. The goal is to get all those streets fully repaved with the money that National Grid, I think it's $3.25 million that they agreed to pay the city to do the work.
So to be clear, the city isn't going to be paying for any of this. This is going to be all on National Grid's nickel. Is that correct?
It's National Grid money, so
yeah, because the reason
you don't pay it because you have solar on your roof. I pay it because I pay my electricity bills. But yeah, it's National Grid paying money to the city to repay these streets.
And the reason, of course, is because these are old, inefficient transmission lines, and so. Oh
yeah, the 55-year-old line that's in the rail bed, it's failed. It has failed. It breaks down. They got to repair it. It's been operational, but they've had a couple of downtimes where they've had to rely only on the overhead lines.
Yeah.
And you need that redundancy. So it's important to a lot of people to understand that it isn't the neighborhoods that the pipes are going through that are getting the electricity from this line. But the overall regional reliability of electricity is important as well.
Yeah. Well, we're out of time, Mike, and we could still talk about a few other projects, and maybe we'll do that here in the next couple of weeks. Anything you want to say very quickly in 30 seconds about these projects? Anything to sum up what we've talked about?
I think I said it earlier, but I think it's important. That we really didn't talk about the youth center project, so I'll just say quickly, our kids have significant needs. COVID has really highlighted more and more needs for them, and the youth center that they've been, quote, living in, that's been their space for all these many years, has been wonderful to have. It also, really doesn't meet all the needs that the kids have. So we're planning a 4,000 square foot building where there currently is a building that's about 1,800.
Yeah.
So more than double the size, with some great programmatic space and ability for kids to be, drop in and be safe and enjoy the programming in the facility. So I think that's an important one as well, and we're excited to get that started. The goal is to have that under construction later this year. All these projects matter. We've worked incredibly hard to try to make sure that we squeeze down on the cost and make them all fit by going after other resources and by making sure that things are done in a way that meets our needs and is not extravagant in any way.
Well, I have to say that your administration, in my view, has done a great job doing exactly that. And all the projects, everything that's gone on in the city under your administration, I think has all been very good and positive for the city. Well,
Thank you, Walt.
I'd like to remind our viewers that you've been watching City Scene with Mayor Mike Cahill. I'm your host, Walt Kosmowski. We'll see you next time.